if you can't accommodate my sister, we're getting a divorce. It had been 2 months since my sister-in-law, Mary, returned from overseas and moved into our home. I felt increasingly exploited by her demands each day, and the stress was overwhelming. Desperate to find a solution, I tried to talk to my husband, but he exploded in anger and immediately demanded a divorce. When I argued that such a drastic step was unnecessary, he refused to listen. We need to discuss how we move forward. There's nothing to discuss. My sister will stay here for as long as she wants. His casual dismissal of my concerns fueled my frustration, and I couldn't tolerate it any longer. Our conversation quickly escalated into a heated argument. Mary watched the confrontation unfold without intervening and even smirked with satisfaction. It was clear she was at the heart of the conflict, and I couldn't understand her motives. Mary, who had been living abroad, recently divorced and returned to New York after losing custody of her children and feeling heartbroken. She chose to stay in a hotel rather than face her parents' probing questions. Soon, she began visiting our house more frequently, claiming loneliness. About a week after her visit started, I came home from work to find my husband blocking the entrance to my room. "Hold on, don't just barge in." "Why?" "I can't have my sister staying in a hotel indefinitely, so I'm letting her use this room." He had decided to let Mary move into my room without consulting me. All my personal belongings were still inside. "This isn't okay. You should have talked to me about this first." "You're being petty. Just let her make herself at home. She's not only divorced, but lost her children too." His reprimand made me feel as though I was in the wrong. Silenced, I listened as he instructed me to always knock before entering the room. From then on, Mary occupied my room as if it were hers and began treating me like a servant. "You came home late. I'm hungry. Make me dinner." I had already prepared a meal, so it would be ready soon. "I'll be playing a game in my room. Call me when it's ready." After finishing the meal, I knocked on her door and called her. She emerged, visibly displeased with the spaghetti and meatballs I had made. "I don't like pasta. I can't eat that. Make me a steak with all the sides." "I don't have the ingredients, and it will take a while." "Then just order takeout." "I've already made enough pasta for 3 people. You have to eat it tonight." "Absolutely not. Order takeout now." Conflicted, I felt trapped between my husband's insistence on accommodating his sister and my own frustrations. Whenever I tried to voice my feelings, my husband dismissed them, telling me to consider Mary's situation. Mary, knowing she had her brother's support, even started waking me up in the middle of the night. "I want ice cream. Go buy some now." "What time is it?" 2 a.m. The convenience store at the gas station should be open. Get up. "I was just about to fall asleep. I have work tomorrow. Can you wait until morning?" Whenever I refused her late-night demands, Mary would immediately run to my husband, complaining about me. As a result, I would end up being scolded and forced to get ice cream in the middle of the night. Mary never cleaned up after meals or contributed to household chores. In fact, she expected me to clean her room every day room she had taken over, which used to be mine. Her demands kept escalating, and now she was asking me for money. "Sorry, but I can't give you any. If you need money, ask your brother." "I can't believe you're saying no." "I'll tell him again if you refuse. Are you okay with that?" Although I had been accommodating her needs out of sympathy for her situation, I knew that giving her money would only lead to more demands in the future. That day, I decided to stand up for myself and refused to comply. When my husband came home, Mary tearfully accused me of mistreating her. "Catherine, why did you make my sister cry?" "I just refused to give her money. She doesn't do any chores and treats me like a servant. I'm exhausted. It's been over 2 months since she moved in. Can't you address this?" "Shut up. If you can't take care of my sister, we're getting a divorce." My husband's face turned red with rage as he demanded a divorce. I argued that his reaction was extreme, but he wouldn't hear it. "We need to discuss this properly." "There's nothing to discuss. My sister will stay here as long as she wants." His nonchalant attitude fueled my frustration, and our conversation quickly turned into a heated argument. Mary watched us without intervening and even smirked with satisfaction. It was clear she was at the center of this turmoil, and I couldn't fathom her intentions. Mary's words chilled me to the bone. "I'm going to make you regret this." I'm Catherine, 27 years old, and I'm trapped in a cycle of manipulation by my sister-in-law. My parents divorced when I was young due to my father's infidelity. My mother raised me as a single parent, until she passed away from breast cancer when I was 19. Since then, despite having friends, I've always carried a deep sense of loneliness from not having a family. It was during this time of solitude that I met my husband, Bob. We became a couple 3 years ago after a year of dating. While the initial excitement of marriage has waned, I valued having a family. However, recently, Bob lost interest in his job, quit, and now works part-time 3 days a week. On top of that, my sister-in-law Mary has entered our lives. Mary, who was already married and living abroad when Bob and I tied the knot, was pregnant with her first child and couldn't attend our wedding. We never had the chance to meet due to the distance. I had only heard from my mother-in-law that Mary was a kind and considerate person, so her current behavior left me completely baffled and distressed. Her actions have only grown worse. The next day, when I came home from work, Mary was grinning, clutching a stack of cash that seemed far too large to have come from Bob. "Mary, where did you get all that money?" "I sold some bags and jewelry I found in the bedroom." "Wait, you mean my room? Where else would they be?" Panicking, I rushed to my room and opened the closet, only to find that my mother's heirloom bags and jewelry were gone. Mary's laughter echoed through the house as she watched me emerge from the room in a state of shock. "Why did you sell my things?" "Because you wouldn't give me any allowance. Those were family heirlooms from my mother." "Well, you obviously didn't need them." "That's not the point. Where did you sell them? I need to know now." "Relax. I sold them at Super Thrift Shop, but I doubt you'll be able to get them back." I rushed to the thrift shop, hoping to retrieve my heirlooms. Since Mary had sold them just today, they should still be in the shop's inventory. However, I was met with an unwelcome surprise. The store had a strict policy. Items could only be returned to the seller unless there was proof of theft. Without evidence, there was nothing I could do. I knew about this rule, but in my panic, I had overlooked it. Defeated, I trudged home, fueled by a burning desire for revenge against my sister-in-law. I vowed to get to the bottom of this, starting by cleaning my room. A week had passed, and I was still under the thumb of my demanding sister-in-law, enduring Bob's anger in the process. The moment for a decisive confrontation had arrived. As usual, Mary treated me like a servant, and my patience was wearing thin. That evening, an argument erupted with Bob. "Are you threatening me with divorce again? If you don't start treating Mary better, I might have to." Bob seemed to think that by threatening divorce, I would simply back down and obey. His arrogance was palpable, and Mary stood by his side, smirking. Just then, the doorbell rang. I answered to find my mother-in-law standing there. "Long time no see. Catherine, may I come in?" "I'm glad you're here. Please, come in." "Mom, what brings you here?" Seeing his mother, Bob's expression darkened. Mary, instead of being pleased about the visit, remained expressionless. Why is she acting this way when her mother is visiting? I wondered aloud. "Oh, I didn't realize you had a guest," my mother-in-law remarked, noticing Mary. "What do you mean? Isn't she your daughter?" I asked. "Stop joking. Mary just had her second child. She recently sent me some photos." My mother-in-law pulled out her phone and showed me a picture of the real Mary, who was still happily married and living abroad. The woman in front of us was clearly not the person in the photo. As the imposter tried to leave the room flustered, my mother-in-law firmly stopped her. "Who are you?" "I am a friend." "Yes, she's my friend." Their panicked expressions gave away the lie. I decided it was time to reveal the truth. "So you're not Mary after all." I suspected something was off. "You must be Bob's mistress." "What are you talking about? That's nonsense." I refused to let them deceive us any longer. I pulled out my laptop and showed my mother-in-law a video. I had some footage of the woman and Bob getting county in our living room. Bob tried to grab the laptop to stop her from seeing it, but I stepped in to prevent him. "What is this?" "You better have a good explanation." Bob was at a loss for words, so I took over. "Bob has been allowing this woman, who he claimed was Mary, to stay with us for over 2 months. He did it out of pity because she was going through a divorce and had lost custody of her child. On top of that, this woman sold my mother's heirlooms at a thrift shop without my permission." The video clearly showed the woman looking pleased as she talked about the money she made from selling my mother's heirlooms, even suggesting to Bob that they go out and enjoy themselves with the money. How could she do something so awful? So what happened to the heirlooms? They could only be returned to the person who sold them, so they're currently at the thrift shop. Turning to the woman, who was now visibly uncomfortable, I asked, "You're Megan Foster, aren't you?" "No, You're mistaken. Don't make false accusations. Do you have any evidence to support your claim? It's pointless to pretend otherwise. You might not know, but I'm actually the manager of Super Thrift Shop. I didn't see you there. I wasn't at the shop when my mother's heirlooms were sold. I was attending a meeting at headquarters. As the shop manager, I was able to check the age of the person who sold the items. That's how I realized the woman wasn't my sister-in-law. Without solid proof, I was worried she might come up with excuses, so I devised a plan. My mother-in-law had been wanting to see a performance by her favorite artist, so I bought tickets for her. I asked her to pick up the tickets and invited her to stay the night at our house, so she wouldn't have to travel back. She was thrilled, completely unaware of the situation, and that's how we ended up here. I'm sorry for not telling you the truth sooner. It's okay. I understand how difficult this must be for you. By the way, how did you get the footage? I didn't want my belongings sold without my permission again, so I set up hidden cameras disguised as light bulbs in my room. I had a vague suspicion that she might be involved with Bob, but I never imagined it would be like this. The footage clearly showed them being intimate while I was away. It was shocking at first, and given the constant arguments Bob and I were having, I had been considering ending things, but seeing your husband cheat is still incredibly hard. Catherine, Mom, I was manipulated by this woman. How pathetic, lying about her being your sister and letting her stay at our house. What were you thinking? Don't blame me. I only pretended to be your sister because if our affair was discovered, I would be kicked out with nowhere to go. Be quiet. You're the one who suggested it would be convenient for me to use your wife as a housemaid. You even said if we ended up divorcing, you wouldn't have to pay alimony. I was stunned and furious. With everything falling apart now, it's clear we can't fix this. Maybe it's best if you both get divorced so you and I can move on. Bob. Fine. You've always wanted a divorce. I've already prepared the papers. Just fill them out and file them. As I handed Bob the divorce papers, already filled in with my name, he panicked. Don't rush this. I don't want to leave you. Just let this one thing go. Watching Bob beg on his knees was pitiful. His mistress, tearful, clung to him. You won't leave me, will you? I have nowhere else to go if you kick me out. Shut up. Don't come near me. Bob pushed the woman away, but her desperate pleas made the scene even more uncomfortable. Instead of my husband, who couldn't even bring himself to look at her, I delivered the crucial message. You don't need to worry about where to go. What do you mean? The police. I've already reported you for stealing and selling my belongings. They should be arriving any minute now. I'll go back to the thrift shop right away and get your things back. Please tell them it was a mistake. As the police sirens grew louder, the woman, realizing the gravity of the situation, offered her first genuine apology. I'm truly sorry. I've learned my lesson. I won't do it again. If a simple apology was enough, we wouldn't need the police, would we? I directed the officers to the woman responsible for stealing and selling my belongings. She was soon taken into custody. Meanwhile, Bob, who had been blankly watching the scene unfold, began to plead once more. Don't leave me. Your salary is much higher than mine. If you abandon me, I won't be able to survive. You understand that, right? You don't need to live a lavish lifestyle. Besides, you should be working more than just 3 days a week. Either way, you'll have to work harder to pay me alimony. I'll pay the alimony, but can we avoid a divorce somehow? No chance. My decision is final. Sign the divorce papers now. Under my firm insistence and my mother-in-law's urging, Bob reluctantly signed the divorce papers. Regarding the alimony, can we deduct it from our asset division? We don't have any shared assets, but you do have a decent amount of savings. My savings were from before we married, so they aren't part of the split. In fact, I've been covering most of our living expenses since we got married, so I'm actually in the red. My husband went pale upon hearing this, but we ignored his reaction and proceeded to evict him from the house. After dealing with this ordeal, a sense of melancholy lingered. That evening, my mother-in-law and I shared drinks and had a heartfelt conversation. My mother's heirloom bags and jewelry were eventually returned, with proof of theft. The divorce was finalized quickly, and I demanded $20,000 in alimony from both Bob and his mistress. Bob was disowned by his in-laws and broke up with his mistress, who was released from jail. As they continued to argue, my mother-in-law, concerned about me being alone, reached out to me regularly. This incident had only strengthened our bond. 3 years later, I stood in a chapel in a wedding dress, holding hands with the man who had eagerly awaited my arrival, as we exchanged vows to love each other for eternity. Tears of happiness streamed down my cheeks.